Chris Felton. I'm a founding member of WealthWave here in Greenwood Village, Colorado. And for the last 21 years, we've been teaching thousands of people how money works, leveling up their financial literacy, and teaching them how to become entrepreneurs. And we are super excited today to be sharing our E2E initiative with the public for the very first time. And what E2E stands for is, how do you shift people from being a small E, which stands for an employee, which is limited time, limited control, limited financial upside, to becoming an entrepreneur, which means time, control, unlimited financial upside. And when I started my entrepreneurial journey 21 years ago, the image of an entrepreneur was one of a madman, mad woman, tons of risk, tons of failure, working 100 hours a week away from your family, chopped up on caffeine, and it just gave you a horrible image of risk. And so being an employee was really the safe way to go. And I think what the pandemic has taught us is that is totally reversed. For the tens of millions of people that were employees that have been laid off and furloughed, and they had lack of time control and financial control, those of us that have been entrepreneurs not only survived through that, but we thrive because we're focused on solving problems. And in my opinion, being an entrepreneur is no longer optional. And that belief has been driven even deeper. I highly recommend you pick up a book by an author named Josh Tolley. Josh Tolley, the book's called Evangelpreneur. And what he does masterfully in that is he basically makes the case for being an entrepreneur based on pure math alone. And the challenge why 90% of Americans retire broke, why this generation is doing worse than previous generations, why future generations are going to do worse than this generation, is based on two facts. Number one, we're mainly an employee-based economy, and we are an inflation-based economy. And so what the government wants to tell you is that real inflation is 2 to 4%. It's not true. He proves the math out in the book. Get the book. But real inflation for the last 100 plus years has been 10% annual. 10% annual inflation. And the problem with wage growth as an employee is your wage growth is only 3%. So every year you wake up on January 1st and you are 7% behind the curve, and you just can't keep up. And if you take your bills, I recommend you do this, your current bills, add them up, and then add 50% to those bills, right? In the next 5 years, 50% or more, those bills are going to grow. You got to ask yourself, are your wages as an employee, are they going to keep pace? And I was talking to a good friend this week, and she said, Chris, I got to become an entrepreneur. I've been making the same amount of money for the last 7 years. My bills have increased, but my wages haven't kept up. And he talks about in his book about his neighbor who's in his 80s, who did everything he was told to do. In the 1960s, he was making a great wage of $5,000 a year. And his financial planner said, hey, put away 10%, pay off your house, and you'll be living in style. And if you could just save 30% of your annual income, if you could just, or have 30 times your annual income saved. So if you could just have 150,000 saved, have your house paid off, you're going to be good. Well, guess what? He's not good. In fact, he had to sell his house because he could no longer afford the property taxes. And he turned to Josh. He's like, what happened? He said, brother, you were playing a game you couldn't win. You're playing a game called the inflation wave, right? And the inflation wave is real. And the only way out of that is you absolutely have to become an entrepreneur. You've got to be a business owner. And so that's what today is really all about, is we want to equip you and give you the skills. There's no sales pitch. There's no offer at the end. This is all value. We got a lineup of some of the best entrepreneurs in our business. They're going to share techniques and tactics and mindset, so that you can really start to sit back and think about, what, we're really shifting to this thing called a gig economy. If you Google that term, gig economy, Uber's a gig, Airbnb's a gig. Everybody's understanding that the only way to have your dreams come true, right? Because if saving 30% or like 30 times your income, if saving 30 times your income didn't work then, it's not going to work now. So if you're making 100 grand a year, it's scary, right? $3 million saved is not going to be enough. And so the only way out, the only way to stay ahead of the inflation wave is to be an entrepreneur. And so we're excited to share with you from some of our best entrepreneurs on our team. They were chosen not only because of their success, their track record, but really they're very mission driven. And we at WealthWave have two missions. One is to stamp out financial literacy and teach people how money works. The second is to teach people how to move from being an employee to an entrepreneur. And I really believe the biggest part of our mission is that second part and what we're going to talk about today. And so the first deal that's up for us today, Abe and Agnes, how you guys doing?
Great.
Fantastic.
We're going to take you through the first section of the slides, and I'm excited to hear from Agnes Medina, one of my most favorite people on the planet. She was one of our first that I discovered and found 20 years ago. Can you believe it?
Wow, time flies.
I know. And Agnes's skill is she looks the same now as she did 20 years ago. Like the woman just does not age. She just keeps fine wine, right, Abe? She just gets better and better. And I honestly don't know where we'd be if I wouldn't have found her, 20 years ago. She's been a big part of our mission, our training, an amazing leader. Her clients love her, consistent, trustworthy, super smart, mother of two girls and a grandmother. It doesn't look like it. A grandmother, right, of two. And then we got Abe Fitzsimmons, serial entrepreneur, but his last stop is with us. And when I think about Abe, I think about being persistent, incredible work ethic, mentally tough. He's married, father of 3 youngins, right? I know your wife has her hands full today, right? Anyway, so tell her thanks for letting you be with us. But anyway, I'll let you guys take over. I'm excited to hear what you have to talk about, and let her rip. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that great introduction. I don't know where I would be if I was not introduced to this business, and I don't know what I would do if I didn't become an entrepreneur. So I have we have some great things to share with you today. First of all, I ran across a statistic that says that 62% of Americans want to be their own boss. That's a large percentage, and 14% believe that they can make the move to entrepreneurship. Well, what we want to do is help those people that want to make that shift with their Plan E. So that's what Plan E is all about. So before we get started, we really are started. We are going to start off with a few warm-up questions. So take a look at some of the things on this screen. And take a minute. What we want you to do is identify 3 areas, write them down in your life that you want more freedom and control over. So take a minute. Is it who you work with, your creativity, buying things, having more fun? I'm just going to set the timer here and just give you a few seconds to choose those things that you want more control over. You're probably going to need more time than I'm going to give you, but you can always come back to this. Okay, so for me personally, I have an accounting and bookkeeping background, and I became an entrepreneur back 20 years ago when I met Chris Felton, mainly because I was bored. I was bored with accounting, go figure. So maybe some people aren't. But I also felt like I was not contributing to society, really, even though getting people's finances in order or reporting the past is a good thing. And so that's one reason. And another very big reason is that I wanted control of my time. So 20 years ago, I was a younger mother, and I just needed more freedom. I needed more freedom, even though I enjoy my freedom today too. Those of you that know me know that I love the control of my time. The most important reason, though, the third reason is that I wanted to be an example of success for my daughters and for my granddaughters. So entrepreneurship like removes the glass ceiling and allows me to do more. There's no cap. And Abe, tell us about you and your three.
Thank you, Agnes. It's deeply personal for me. My number one is caring for family and friends. And you know, I grew up in inner city Denver, Denver native, and we started off in the roughest part of town. Back then it was called Five Points. Now the kids nowadays call it something else, but Uptown or something like that. But I don't even know if they'd welcome me back there now. But it's, you know, growing up, our family instilled in us, our parents, we were never wealthy, never had a lot of money, but it was always a heart for service and a heart for others. And so we took in multiple families as we grew up, and we helped neighborhood kids and neighborhood families. And you know, sometimes it might have just been with groceries, or it could have just been taking them in for a while, or it could have been with something that they needed. But that was instilled in me at a very early age. But also just the opportunity, you know, the role that money played in what I saw, how our lives and how other people's lives played out. If you didn't have money, it was no to certain opportunities, and felt very limiting. And so that put a big impression on me. So it was for me that you know, both the positive side I want to do for my family, take care of my family, but also be able to provide and take care of opportunities. Secondly, you know, I saw my dad was an entrepreneur. For the most part, for most of his life, he was a solopreneur. But some of the things that he said is just like, hey, you know, I don't have a boss. I have control over my time. And that kind of spoke to me. The flip side of that is he said, well, you know, when you got your clients, so you got a lot of bosses. And so that's a reality of being an entrepreneur. You don't just have one boss, you got a lot of bosses. But then, you know, really lastly, I would say just, you know, for me, it's the doing something meaningful. You know, that's that impact. That's been something in my heart, you know, since I was a young person. And as Chris said, this is my last stop. A little bit about my background. I always thought I would build a business and then sell it and then go have an impact. And as Chris said, I was a serial entrepreneur. You know, I've been part of starting six other businesses, and 5 of them are mine. And then they were all great experiences. Mostly successful, and had a lot of stress and mistakes along the way, but mostly success. But nothing that was the home run. Nothing that was not just the financial success, but nothing that had the same kind of impact that we are able to have here. And like I said, growing up, I thought I was going to have this business that I would build and then sell and then go have the impact. And when I found the business we're in right now, it's so amazing because it allowed me to do both. But those are the things that my reasons. It really just some of it's an example. But if you're sitting there thinking about, do I want to become an entrepreneur? Why did I become? It just frankly at the end of the day just spoke to my heart. And so if you're saying that I don't have examples, but you know, this is something that speaks to your heart, just become an entrepreneur, getting into business for yourself. That's your number one indicator that you probably should. Appreciate. So again, as Agnes said, you know, just wrestle with those. Your 3 are going to be different than ours. But how many you ask yourself, you know, how many of you heard like people talk about, you know, gurus on YouTube, or just you go to workshops and talk about your why? What is my why? You probably ask yourself that. Simon Sinek has a great book, Start With Why. And it's a fantastic book and you should read it. But oftentimes we ask yourself, what is my why? And the reality is you don't usually just have one why. We have multiple whys. But the easiest way to break it down is there's at least 2 whys that we should be talking about. And that's what we're going to at least talk about today anyway. But you do have multiple whys, okay? But the first why is usually a person. When you talk about your deepest, most powerful, motivating inspirations and things that drive you, it usually is related back to people, okay? And there's a good saying that says your why should make you cry, okay? And when you get people talking about, you know, just, hey, why are you in business? And they'll usually sell, you know, the cars and the houses and the cool stuff, right? That's pretty surface level stuff, and that stuff's great, and definitely, you deserve it. You work that hard. We're in America, right? But that, if it doesn't spark the emotional deal, that's not the real deal. That's not the real why. Because in the reality is, that's not what's going to keep you going when it gets tough, because it does get tough. Your why should make you cry. It's usually related to an individual, somebody who did something for you, somebody who believed in you, somebody who sacrificed for you, somebody whose example that you hope to live up to one day. And for me, I have multiple of those. I mentioned my father already, 2 grandmothers, just people with incredible work ethic, raising their families and still working outside the home, and just tremendous folks. Things are important, because if you don't have those are typically mile markers of your, achieving your success. So I want to give you one other analogy when it comes to a why, though. So you have multiple whys, and usually related to people. So you got to think of who the people most important to you and have the biggest impact. But then whys, we have multiple. It's the best analogy I've ever had is that whys are like your logs on your fire, and they fuel, number one, they fuel your fire. So that's one part. But the second thing is that over time they do actually burn up. And which means you need to put new logs on the fire, because you need new inspiration. Once you get that house, and once you get that car, once you hit those things, you had that family vacation, you had that experience, it's okay, what's next, right? You got to put new logs on the fire and keep that inspiration going. Go ahead, Agnes. So let me ask you a question. In fact, let me ask you give you 2 questions. Back to the previous slide real quick. What are your 2 whys? Here's the most powerful questions you got. What am I willing to fight for? If your whys aren't clear, here's two great questions. These come actually from Steve Siebold. He's the author of 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. What am I willing to fight for? What am I willing to die for? You want to cut to the chase? You want to get real with yourself real quick. What am I willing to fight for? What am I willing to die for? And that's when you start to bring some emotion up. So, all right, next slide. I want you to read both of these real quick. If you don't build your dream, someone else will hire you to help build theirs. Okay? And then the second was, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And I want to ask yourself, which one of those quotes hits you more? Which one hits harder? Which one hits home? And I can tell you which one hits home for me, and I'm going to ask Agnes which one hits home for her. But there's, I'll tell you that the one on the left, that actually hits me harder. Agnes, what about you?
Well, when we were talking about that, it's funny because the one on the right hits me harder, because I even bought a magnet that I keep on my refrigerator that says the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So it's completely different. And we were having a conversation about this, and I'm like, well, what does it mean if this one this one hits me harder and the other one hits you harder? So explain that.
Yeah, and you might say, well, does it even matter? Or, just what's driving you? The reality is you got, things that inside drive you. But there's that old saying, know thyself, right? What does drive me? Because we're talking about your why. This is the fuel. This is what's going to keep you going when it's tough. And so one of the things that you might start to notice is that the one on the left, I'm a driver personality. Okay, I'm pretty analytical. Sometimes, some people call that type A, and whatever you think of that, good or bad or different. But in general, what are the characteristics of the people who on the left versus the right? So ones on the left, a lot of times are more goal oriented. Okay, and one on the right are a little more people oriented. Okay, so I've got some of both, right? I said, my number one was people and family, the friends and family, taking care of those folks. But also, I'm a pretty analytical, pretty driver type personality. But, there's a lot of mothers, there's a lot of grandmothers, there's a lot of maybe even people, just fathers or grandfathers, who maybe had their career and you might go looking for an encore career. And so, I'm looking to have impact. I'm looking to help. I'm looking to, right? And you're relating that stuff to your dreams of just, hey, something better. Like, okay, that was fine to have a career, but now I want to have impact, right? And so that might be what drives you is that quote on the right. And neither one is right or wrong. it's who you are, right? And it's what drives you. But it's helpful to know, just a little bit about yourself and what really drives you. But it's just interesting to play. And so maybe ask yourself that and start to get to the root of like really who you are and what drives you.
Thanks, Abe. I really like those questions that you shared from Steve Siebold in terms of getting to your why. Like, what are you willing to fight for and what are you willing to die for? And gosh, even just asking myself the question is like, it just like does make me want to cry for what, my answers are going to be. Those are deep. Those are deep. I'm going to have to journal on those for sure. So our mission, if you haven't picked up on it yet, is to help people gain more freedom over their time and their money. So this is where the E to E comes in. And how do we do it? Well, we help them. We give them a plan, help them develop their plan to go from employee to entrepreneur. So that's how we do it.
Okay. Actually, do you want to go back real quick? How we do it? So let's give you an example. So Chris threw out a modern day example of a guy who's out there, and he just as Chris said, he hit the nail on the head. Clarion voice, right? He's like John the Baptist in the wilderness. He's calling it out like and really like not most people are doing. Most people out there just saying, well, they're talking about the economy or just stick in there in corporate America, right? But most Americans we're way past that, right? We read through that. It's bluff and bluster. And so people are saying, hey, it's just, that's the way it's been forever and it ain't getting any better. And just the COVID deal has just brought it into sharp focus that old system doesn't work anymore. Well, you see behind me, there's an example of another construct that's a great place to start. If you're thinking about getting business for yourself, you're just starting to get business, or maybe you had a go of it already. It's called the Cash Flow Quadrant from another guy named Robert Kiyosaki. So Evangelpreneur, great book, and he's more modern day, and he's given the math of why you should. So maybe you're convinced already that you should. Okay, this just gives you a mental picture of maybe why you should or what's the path to get from E to E. Because again, you're going to be coaching yourself if you don't have a system where somebody's showing you exactly what to do. And so that's why a lot of times people frankly buy into franchises, because they have a system, they have mentorship, right? In our company, it's already built in, but what most people don't have that. They have a skill and they say, well, hey, take a hike, boss. I'm firing you and I'm just going to go do this on my own. And I'm just, whatever. I'm a plumber. I'm going to go, have my own plumbing company. I'm an electrician or whatever, fill in the blank. And, I'm an attorney. And they just say, okay, I'm going to go start a business. Well, you can go do that for $50 on the Secretary of State website, but that doesn't mean you have a business yet, right? How do you get into business? So the Cash Flow Quadrant, and if you haven't read the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, talks about there, and then he has a book specifically about the Cash Flow Quadrant, another great resource. It gives you a mindset to say, well, how do I go from literally an entrepreneur mindset, and that's where 85 to 90% of Americans, this is where we're literally coach and train from the time we're yay high to the rest of our lives, is how to be an entrepreneur. Tell me what
employee. You mean
how to be an employee? Yeah, right. Right. Tell me what to do and where to do and how to do and when to do. Right. Just okay, I'm here, boss. Tell me everything. Right. To go into this category and you go from here to here. Now you went from the frying pan into the fire, because these guys, the S stands for self-employed or specialists, right? And so a lot of doctors and dentists and even pro athletes and realtors and mortgage people, right there, a lot of those, they're all self-employed or specialists. Solopreneurs, that's what the other S, right? So all of those are related. And a lot of times these guys said, hey, I'm willing to work 80 hours a week so I don't have to work 40 hours a week, as long as I'm working for myself. Okay. But take a real quick inventory who the most stressed out, people hardest working, stressed out, most tired people in your world, they're probably in this category, frankly, right? And so it's not a bad thing. At least at least I have my destiny in my own hands. Well, at least I'm working for myself, and that's true. And according to the IRS, you might own a business, but you still really don't have a business, because the reality is what you own is a job. That's what you own. You went from here where somebody else owns a job and telling you what to here, where you own the job and you've got a bunch of bosses, like my dad told me, when I was young, right? Well, how do I go from here to here, be as business owner? Well, what's the number one difference between here and here? It's called leverage, right? In fact, what Kiyosaki talks about is on the left side of the quadrant, you're never going to get financially free. You're never going to build real wealth because you're always trading time for money. Well, how do you ever get out of that? Well, over here, you got to have leverage. And what does that mean in reality? Is you got to have other hands working in your business. You got to have other folks. You got to have other, right? So you got to create systems and processes and have other folks. So you got to have a way to do that. And then if you eventually build it big enough and or make enough wealth, and then you can move down into this quadrant, the investor. So obviously I can't do it justice in that sort of time, but it's a phenomenal book, but it's also a great, for people who start off in employee mindset, it's a great business 101 book. And that's a foundational concept in that book.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. Okay, so here's the deal. We're getting ready to pass the baton in a sec, but if you are not convinced yet as to, well, should I be an entrepreneur or how can I be an entrepreneur? I think I want to, but right, why entrepreneurism? If you haven't read Kiyosaki, if you haven't read Evangelpreneur, if you haven't gone to shadowstatistics.org, right, to prove to yourself, right, that the numbers are real and real inflation's 8 to 10% and all that stuff, and right, inflation's doing this and wages. If you're not convinced yet, you got to convince yourself, right? It's not going to come from us, but the reality is, I don't think there's many people left in the economy today that don't know that the system's broke. So this is the answer, right? It's owning your own business, because that's the only way you're going to control your destiny. But the reality is that it's not just as simple as go jump into business and all your troubles are solved, right? It's hey, right, I'm a business owner, right? That's just the beginning. And for some people, it's the beginning of a bright future, and some people it could be the beginning of problems, right? Because like you read on the side, it says the right kind of business ownership is the greatest way to create freedom over time and money, but the wrong kind of business ownership can be worse than being an employee. And I think we can all think of quite a few businesses right now that are hurting when the economy goes down, right? The restaurants are hurting. A lot of retail businesses are hurting. They got lots of debt. They got lots of obligations. They got lots of overhead. They got, right? And so there's some tough choices out there. So the right business can make all the difference in the right ways. The wrong business could be some trouble. So I'm going to pass the baton to Chris. He's going to introduce our next speaker. So appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, awesome job. And man, the why is huge, and it changes over time. And initially my why was proving to myself I could do it. And then I collected many faces of people that said I couldn't do it. So that became my why, was proving them wrong. And then, like you said, the material stuff's fine, but it's never going to really move you. It's got to be tied back to people. And ultimately, it was my big why was I wanted to stop having stressful financial conversations with my wife Marlo, which thank God we haven't had those in a long time. But those aren't any fun. Financial stress is a big reason. And so we're going to bring up Wendy.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you guys. You rocked it as always. Wendy and Joe. Wendy the Great, are you on?
I am.
What's
Yes.
up?
How you doing?
Good. I love these two. Let me properly introduce Wendy the Great. Corporate background, and is now you're unemployable, right? Nobody would hire you, right? And that's good news, isn't it? Very successful at the corporate level, executive level, just unbelievable. And when I think about Wendy, I think a lot integrity, super credible. She loves our mission. She's a phenomenal spouse, incredible mom to a superstar son who's doing well. And so we're grateful we found her. Joe, another serial entrepreneur, man. This guy knows what he's talking about. Ran many successful ventures. He's one of our great leaders, one of our best trainers, very passionate, very articulate. And, both these guys have tremendous momentum in their businesses right now during the pandemic. And Joe's also a new husband, almost a year, right, Joe?
Almost.
To Dee the Great. a great father, great grandfather, and you guys are in for a treat with these two. So the floor is yours. Take it over.
Thank you. Y'all can hear me okay?
You're coming in well.
Perfect. Perfect. So as you can see, the slide on the screen, the goal is a business that you can run and that does not run you. Well, honestly, that's where I found myself over 5 years ago, before I stepped into the light of owning my own business. I have to be honest, it wasn't the plan. In fact, I didn't have a plan, which was part of the problem. And I'm sure many of you guys can relate, when you are trying to figure out what you're going to do to, feel career satisfaction and to know that you have the ability to do what you want to do for yourself and for your family. Sometimes those are tough questions. It's interesting. I run a networking group that helps people find work. Now, what is interesting about that group is that most of the folks are looking for employment. And I try to be the poster child for, why don't you consider, or have you considered, or be open to having your own business? If you had a dream and you walked away from that dream years ago, when you, I'll use the word settled potentially for a job that paid you well, but didn't necessarily fill you, fill that heart, fill that spirit, why not do that now? So I said I stepped into the light with my own business. It was truly that. It was like walking into the light from the darkness. I was working hard, really long hours, early morning meetings, late nights as well, because I worked for a company that was global. And so we were on the phone with China and Russia and all these other kinds of teams, right? But you know what? I was working really, really hard. And I actually was having fun for the most part, except I didn't feel like I had a lot of control. And you heard those kinds of themes from Agnes and Abe, who did a phenomenal job really kind of painting the picture. But guess what? The people I was working the hardest for, my son, who's now 21, my mother, who lives with me, and she's now 88, and I'm a wife, and I can't say that I could give myself good grades, in terms of being a really good wife back then, because what did I do? I was driving someone else's dream. I had deadlines I had no control of, revenue targets I didn't create, and was given inadequate resources to achieve those deadlines, right? Now, sometimes, you have I was the vice president. You feel like you have control on those things. I honestly did not. And I don't think I even realized it. I was being run. I was being run by somebody else. Other people's schedules, other people's deadlines, other people's agendas. Honestly, I didn't realize it. I worked hard to be able to get more pay, right? By getting the coveted promotion. And sorry, my slide's not going forward. Hold on. Okay, there we go. That coveted promotion, that thing that they hold up, in front of you to say, yeah, you can make more money. We'll give you the promotion. We'll do all this, that, and the other. But you had to fight for that. That wasn't guaranteed. It was dependent on how the company was performing. It was dependent on how many open slots they had. And as you know, in corporate America, as you go up the ladder, there's a bottleneck. There aren't as many opportunities, right? So for all that fighting and all that work, what if you didn't get the coveted promotion, right? Then what? In corporate America, it's up or out. And so plan B, finding another job, depending on the job market. Now we're in the COVID world. That would have been a tough thing had this been my decision set at that time, right? But you got to go get a new job, and that means starting over. Same hamster wheel. So my plan B turned into my plan E, and I'm so grateful that for God or whatever for opening my eyes to say, Wendy, there's another way, right? So now I have my life more on my terms. My lifestyle is determined by me. I have no risk of being downsized. I don't have to fight for what I want in the grand scheme of things because I can create that reality for myself. It's not because there's a bottleneck. It's not because of some other company's business performance, right? I found a business model that gives me as much as I give to it. In terms of process and resources, people, some of the things that Abe talked about earlier, right? Because not all businesses are created equal, and that includes the business opportunities that are out there. The people in my networking group, they're doing consulting, they're doing contract work, they're going to do franchises. They're looking at a lot of different options, and knowing which one works best for you, sometimes as a little trial and error, is probably, you know, where you have to get to before you really know whether it's going to work. I was pretty easily able to ease into this business and to build it up so that I could maintain a level of stability, you know, mentally that risk. I was able to combine it with my business skills from the corporate world, excuse me, and leverage those skills in a business where I'm in business for myself, but I'm not by myself. I've created a plan. Interestingly enough, I've done strategic plans and business plans all my life, but I never really created a plan that incorporated my life so much, right? So I have that plan for myself and my business and a roadmap for where I have set my own business goals and personal goals. When I was employed, my goals were someone else's, right? And they did not get me necessarily to the level that I wanted or into the, you know, corporations of, you know, sometimes offer you other business, you know, sections to work in. It doesn't necessarily get you there for all that hard work, right? I would make them money and I would help them get to their level, right? But their next level didn't necessarily sync up, right? And align with who I was or my values. So being an entrepreneur, I have found, remember, I didn't start off this way, guys, but I'm so happy I decided to take the leap. My sister often said to me, just see where you want to go, jump off, there'll be the parachute if you know where the pull cords are. I didn't need a parachute, but this has been the best decision of my life. Being an entrepreneur has shown me I can thrive and have the life that I want by creating my own roadmap and hitting my own goals. I'm hitting the mark, right? I'm hitting my own mark and I'm doing it with intention. And that's for me. Thanks guys for listening.
Great job, Wendy. Well, that
Thank
was
you.
fantastic. Yeah, you have grown. I've watched you grown over the years. It has been fun to work with you. And here's one of the greatest things about being an entrepreneur. You get to pick people that you surround yourself with. I don't know how many listening have ever been with a job and the person next to you works half as much as you do, but you get paid the same. And there's nothing really that ever happens to that. So it's just a treat. This is a bunch of entrepreneurs that believe in what we're doing, obviously. And I personally believe that the spirit of entrepreneurialism is in the air. It is alive. If you go back to the early 1900s, around the 1900s to about 1913, 80% of Americans were self-employed. If you roll up 100 years later, it's exactly the opposite. But I believe that tide is changing, and I believe that that scale is starting to tip because people want to have control, like the other three speakers were talking about. They want to have freedom. They want to have liberty. I'm going to share some stories about what I've learned, so hopefully it can benefit. But I've had 4 businesses, and each one of them that I started, I thought was going to be the one. And going into it, of course, you have to believe completely in what you're doing. And coming out of high school, I was a jeweler, and I started a line of jewelry that went nationwide. The problem was, because of what I was doing, I developed severe tendonitis. I couldn't make the jewelry anymore, so I had to figure out what else to do. So I started, I played musically my entire life, so I played professionally for a while, and I started a company where I built PA systems. I was a woodworker, and I went to college for audio engineering, so you marry those two, you've got PA systems. And I had a company that built PA systems from scratch for a while. Problem is, that's a very specialized area, and I built myself right out of a job. I satisfied all my customers, and I didn't have anybody left. So I had to leave that one, and then I went to the manufacturing field. That one was good to me, and it lasted quite a while. I had a company that was a multi-million-dollar company. It got bigger than I ever expected to be. I didn't plan on this, but I became the 5th largest in the state of Colorado for the manufacturing side of the trade that I was in. It was highly specialized, and I made a lot of money, but I did not have a lot of freedom. I don't know if you know any business owners that work 7 days a week. That was me. I got my t-shirt for that. And in 1999, I hadn't taken a vacation in 5 years. Not a great way to go. It was going to kill me. I created a monster that had an appetite that was ferocious, and I couldn't keep up with it. So I decided to fire myself and sold that in 2000. And was drawn to the financial services industry because I wanted to have freedom and an income both at the same time. And so when I looked at this industry, I was analyzing the risk and the reality and the mindset and the things that I had learned from my mistakes. I was looking for answers, and I knew if I talked to the right people, I might be able to find some of those answers. So I took a deep dive and I looked at it, and I was attracted to it. And that E factor is like, kind of like becoming your own CEO. When you're tipping into that point of starting your own business, thinking about it, done that once before, or starting a new one, you're the person in charge. You're the owner. The buck stops there. Hopefully, you're the highest paid person in your organization. And you're probably going to end up wearing a lot of hats. But there's no classroom that teaches this. The colleges, they train us not to be an owner. They train us to be an employee. And it is rampant, and it's throughout. So if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to get it going in that direction, find someone to talk to. Find someone who's done it. This is a whole lineup today of people that have done it and taken that plunge. And yeah, it can be scary. It can be very scary. But get close to people that have done that before. A lot of industries, now I come from the manufacturing and the service both, so I've kind of had my feet in both camps. On the manufacturing side, most companies rely on their profits, the return of their labor and their efforts after the cost of goods is typically about 3 to 5%. That is where their money that they get to keep lives, in a 3 to 5%. So if something comes in there and messes up those percentages, like the cost of goods or COVID or whatever it might be, that can tip the scales negative very, very quickly. In the service industry, it's really time and resources. And I feel for that industry, the service industry is getting hit pretty hard right now. But in both industries, you need to go in with your eyes wide open and say, how much can I make? It's really good to know what is your potential return of your investment into what you're doing. So yeah, for me, I mean, the risks were very important to me. I'd learned what not to do. I was in search of the right things to do. And knowing the first step's really important. What's your risk? Now, a lot of people go into real estate. Guess what? Real estate has risks. Real estate has vacancy risk. It has interest rate risk. It has vandalism risk. It has acts of God risk. I mean, hailstorms can do a number on a property sometimes. It has credit risk. It has cash flow risk. All those things go into the real estate, but it's a viable way to build wealth. The service industry, of course, the manufacturing industry, a lot of changing markets, cost of goods, labor cost and changes, insurance, liability costs. There's so much that goes into that mix and the chemistry of having your own business. And another thing that's really important to know is, what is your competition? What do they look like? Where are they? How close are they? What is their reach compared to your reach? How can you get out there and be seen and be exclusive and have a little bit of an edge over your competition, or have a special message? Know your audience, the target. What's your target client? Who are you going after? It's really important to know your audience. with my my PA business, building PAs, my audience was so small that I didn't realize going into it, I was going to exhaust my resources. My pool of people, my clients were just too small. In the financial services business, most people want to retire. Most people want to be debt free. Most people would like to get a better return on the money. Most people would like to pay less in taxes. I saw that as a big pool. I mean, pretty much everybody would like to know a little bit more about that. So it is good to know your client, you know, where your audience is. There's a lot of cost involved in being in business. When I was in manufacturing, I had to clear $65,000 a month to keep my doors open. I also was specialized, and I built a lot of medical facilities like hospitals and dental facilities and veterinary clinics. And these dentists, I got to know some dentists, and it was really interesting when I got to talk with them. They had about $1 to $2 million worth of debt before they even made their first dollar. The cost of their education, the cost of their equipment to open shop, to build a facility, to find the right mall, whatever it is, to bring that. So it's really important to know your cost in going into business. Know your systems, your process. If you know anything about construction, a lot of times when you're driving by a construction area and you're seeing the streets in and they're just starting to frame the first house, by the time they start framing that house has already been 50% built. They've already laid the sewers. They've already laid the streets. They've already brought in the sewer systems, the electrical systems. Everything you can't see is underground, and now they're able to resurrect that house and make it functional. So, you know, finding your clients is important. A lot of people are really good at particular crafts. You got to be good at knowing your tech. Hey, there's things out there these days. Thank God we've got the ability to do what we're able to do today, because 10 years it wasn't even possible with the websites and the blogs. But could you imagine having to develop that yourself? That is a very, very daunting task, building it from scratch. You can adopt somebody else's, tweak it, but boy, that's not in everyone's wheelhouse. Make sure you don't run out of cash. You know, my problem with my business is I was doubling in size every year, and the banks didn't like it. They were saying I was growing too fast. They didn't want to loan me money, but it was kind of a catch-22. What if your competitor's running out of money? Make sure you've got money to have a conversation, you know, where you can do a merger or a buy or whatever that might be. But markets are going to go up and markets are going to go down. Unfortunately, we're going through that down right now, and it's stretching people. And I believe people have that spirit within inside of them to reach and do something exceptional and do something different. The Great Depression created more millionaires than any era in our country's history. Why? Because people were pushed to a point where they were forced into expand their mind, to look out at the world and say, where's a problem I can solve? Where's something that needs me to step in and help others solve a problem? But in business, you have all these things, right? You've got developing, you know, growing too slowly, growing too fast. You've got legal and contracts and all those things. So all these things are important, and the most rewarding success will almost always be the most painful to learn. But I promise you this, along the way, you are going to learn so much, and the price is worth it. A lot of people in business have had more than one. A lot of them have also, unfortunately, lost businesses, but because of their experience and the things that they learned along the way, they were able to rebuild. And choose your business wisely. Go in, do your homework, find out the cost, find out what your competition looks like, know your customer. Time and control, I mean, who's got it? My problem is I had no control over my time. I wanted my life back. That's what drew me to this industry. Who has control of your life? When you're going and looking at a business, are you going to have control? Because if you don't, you're going to burn out. And even people that make high net worth, like CEOs and things like that, guess what? They can lose their jobs. How hard is it to go out and replace a $300,000 or a $400,000 income? Pretty tough, right? So when you're in control and you've got control of your income and your business and everything else, as an entrepreneur, that's absolutely the best place you want to be. You know, it's hard work. It is going to definitely be hard work. However, it's going to be totally and completely worth it. I've learned it's one of the most important things in business and in life is to save your money. Save money. My grandmother, God bless her, she was a little thing and she never made over $20,000 in her life. And one day I had a glimpse of her savings account and I was astonished by the number. And it was a large number. And I asked her, I said, how did you do that? I know you didn't make a lot over your years. How did you save that much money? And she was very cute. She said, Joe, I learned to live more simply so later I can simply live. As an entrepreneur, I would challenge you to make sure you save your money. Live a little bit more simply in the beginning, because later on, if you do it right and if you plan it and you have people around you that can support you and train you and mentor you, give it time. You can live your dream life and you can have everything you want. Don't go buy everything that's new, fresh, and shiny right out of the gate. Save your money and you can have a blast at this. Good luck at your entrepreneur life.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Wendy. World class as always. Grateful we found you guys. And I was just thinking about what I was reading this morning, actually out of Josh Tolley's book. And in the spirit of what we're talking about, he says, if we continue to focus our economy on creating jobs, you hear that all the time, right? Especially in an election year. If we continue to focus our economy on creating jobs, we will continue to harm our children and our nations. The focal shift needs to be made toward reaching our individual potential, and that is never done through employment. Wealth is unlimited and available to everyone. From political and social standpoints, we need to encourage our leaders to shift their focus as well. Instead of creating jobs, they need to focus on creating an environment that encourages small business, which will in turn create more jobs and more wealth. Anyway, totally in the spirit of what we're talking about. And so the next two amazing superstars that we have up, Sheila the Great, are you on?
I'm on.
This lady is a powerhouse. Are you not a powerhouse? Absolutely.
I'm a powerhouse.
I'm a powerhouse. Anyway, she's grown tremendously. I'm so super proud of her. She has big goals, big dreams. Everybody loves her, no question. And she knew a job wouldn't do it at all. And can I say it? You're going to be you're an expecting mom, right?
Yep.
Congratulations. It's so exciting.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
excited?
you.
Awesome.
I'm really excited. It's awesome to be an entrepreneur and step into motherhood as well.
Yeah. Lucky kid. Jackpot having you as their mom.
Thank you.
And then we got Reed the Great. Reed was our first part-time six-figure earners, man. This guy is sharp, mission-driven, focused, persistent, consistent, very successful in the corporate world, but was really fed up with everything that we're talking about. A great husband and father, two boys that I know. I got two boys that are growing up way too fast. And so we got Sheila Hager and Reed Meyer on the next section. Take it over.
Thanks so much, Chris. I could relate to a lot of stuff that Wendy said. We both sort of come from a corporate background, engineering, business. I've done a little bit of everything, operations, finance, process. And what I found is that it's interesting in your career in corporate America is that you often go to the next incremental job, right? So it's really hard to sort of change directions. Even in business school, people that had come in with a marketing background and wanted to go over to finance were competing with the people that had already been in finance, and they had a tough time kind of making those things. So I was continuing on the corporate ladder. I was getting good positions. I'd go into a company, I'd sort of build an organization around me that was skilled and talented on kind of moving things forward. But then I was the guy that always had a high salary next to my name. So when it came to layoffs and whatnot, my name was always on the list because I'd built a good organization that could kind of function without me. which was one of my skills. I couldn't really kind of see that path forward of me continuing to do that around sort of building an organization for 4 or 5 years, really building up the capabilities of the company, and then being laid off. And so layoffs and sort of wanting to kind of control my own future and kind of where I was headed was really kind of what I was looking for the most when I originally came over here. You got to control my time and future. And when I used to consult with companies, I was helping them sort of figure out how to get an extra dollar out of your pocket into theirs, right? So whether that's an extra dollar off to Netflix, they're creating leverage where they can kind of get that money, you know, kind of out of your pocket and into theirs. And when I learned about kind of our industry where you can help somebody sort of get paid ongoing and have that recurring income, that was one of the main things that kind of made me want to move into entrepreneurship. It's been great. Certainly helped us, support us through sort of COVID. We haven't missed a beat. In fact, we've been accelerating through this whole period. And so the interesting part for me is if you look at this chart, I think it's really, you know, interesting in that you've got the, you know, kind of early on in your career, your enthusiasm is high. You're talking to a lot of the people that sort of know, like, and trust you. So it seems like you're making, you know, really good sort of results for sort of limited effort. And that goes along for a while, and you're really trying to kind of move things forward, and you're feeling really good about it. But then we all go through this little part where, you know, here they call it sort of the dip, right? And that's where you're starting to go on, you're having to figure out how to access new markets, how to sort of increase new customers, how to reach new people in new ways. And it seems more like a slog, right? You're sort of working along, and your effort, and Chris always uses the term that, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you hire and fire yourself about 7 to 8 times a day. And I always sort of talk about the road to entrepreneurship is paved with roller coaster tracks, right? So kind of like the picture here, and sometimes there's loop-de-loops and twists and turns, but if you get to that dip, many people quit. And there's been books written about it. Sharon Lecter, who's also one of the authors of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, wrote a book called 3 Feet from Gold, talking about the miner who was sort of working away and then finally gave up. And if he just continued on an extra 3 feet, he would have hit a major gold line and become, you know, wealthy. And it's sort of same here in this thing. Eventually your efforts compound and you start to get some traction, and then your results can kind of explode from there. And what I really learned the most about is in that dip, you really need to, the only things you can really control are your attitude and your activity. And to get out of that dip, what I had to do is, when you sort of hit that is, there's a book called The 12-Week Year. It's a recommendation I have for every entrepreneur that really teaches you kind of how to hone your time into what are those, are you sort of blocking time for those things that are going to sort of create value for you and your business. And so when I first sort of hit this is, I was doing a lot of things and activities that weren't actually building my business, right? They may have been good for learning new things or this or that, but they weren't actually moving my business forward. And so if you can learn to control your time, that's one of the key things that I think I wish I would have learned about before, is to sort of push through that. And it really takes some mental toughness. And Steven Siebold, you know, he's an expert in mental toughness. He talks about that. He calls it, instead of the dip, he calls it the valley of death. So not so bad, but the person that with incredible mental toughness, as Chris pointed out, somebody's going to take us through really how to kind of get through that dip. And that's the amazing Sheila Hager.
All right. Can you guys hear me all right? Perfect. All right. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for the introduction, Chris. And I appreciate just being able to be on here and just share my story about going from an employee to an entrepreneur. Really, I love this slide because I think that everything always starts with the thought in our mind. And so the mindset piece was huge for me to make the decision to actually become an entrepreneur and stick with it, because truly as an employee, I know this sounds kind of intense, but I did feel like I was dying working that 9-to-5 job and sitting there and feeling like I could be doing more and impacting the world in a different way. But instead I was spending 40 hours a week doing things that I didn't feel were making a huge difference. And so I do truly feel that I'm growing the more that I get into entrepreneurship, and the more that I create more in my life and in my business, it's substantial growth from there. And so either way, it's uncomfortable, whether you're growing or you're dying. There truly is no stability. So in my opinion, I think that it's way more fun to be able to be uncomfortable in that growth mode versus decay. So a little bit about me. I grew up the way that a lot of people grow up, thinking that I needed to go to school, get a good job, get good grades, and just be able to retire comfortably, hopefully, after being at that job for maybe 30 or 40 years. And nobody in my family was an entrepreneur or a business owner. So the only thing I ever saw was the employee mindset. A lot of people will ask me now, well, who is your role model, or who is a big influence, and how did you decide to create this totally different life for yourself? And I had a hard time answering that at first, because I didn't have a lot of role models or people I looked up to that I really aspired to be like. But what I did know was what I did not want to do, and I realized very early on that I needed to create something different if I didn't want to have that same life. So the environment that I grew up in really kind of forced me to grow up very fast. It was, I think that I became a very independent thinker very, very early on in my childhood. I would say maybe at the age of 8 or 9, possibly even earlier. I was not super influenced by what my family thought or told me what I should be doing, because quite honestly, as much as I love and respect and care about the people around me, if they don't have the life that I want, it's likely that I'm not going to follow in those footsteps, and I'm going to look for something else that I can be doing instead. So I was really not swayed by other people's opinions. I think that that's a really, really big key in the mindset piece in becoming an entrepreneur and moving forward with what you want to create, regardless of what you're hearing from outside sources. Now, I was really one person that I was thinking about earlier that I was always inspired by was Oprah. I remember coming home from school and always wanting to turn on the Oprah show so I could watch her, you get a car and you get a car, and just give back to people in such a big way. And I think that the biggest thing for me watching her was that she had so much capacity to give and to serve other people, and she had so much abundance in her life, but the more that she gave, her cup still overflowed. She was never depleting herself by giving to other people. So I think that's honestly where it started for me, was the ability to give back. And I thought it was so awesome, not only to give tangible material things to people, but to give people hope, to give people dreams, and maybe the ability to be somebody and to choose their life and create freedom if they want to, regardless of where they came from. So that's where it started for me. Right out of high school, I got a job in customer service, and I moved out right away too. So I worked a lot right out of high school to make sure that I could pay my rent and save some money. And after that, I did save enough money to where I did decide to go to college, because again, wanted to do something different. Nobody in my family had ever graduated college before, but I did quickly find out that college was not the right route for me. I found myself sitting in class calculating how much I was actually going to be paying for my tuition by the time I was done, but I didn't even have a career that I was set on that I wanted to go do, and that kind of scared me a little bit. So I did decide to drop out of college, and I dropped out before I had any idea of what I was going to do next. And so thinking back to how I felt in that moment now, I was extremely scared, and I really kind of felt like I was failing by doing that. But what's really funny is that I trusted my gut and I trusted my intuition to take that leap and to quit school and look for something new. And actually, the financial services industry came into my life probably only a few months later, I would say. And so it's funny that as soon as I let that go, I actually got introduced to the industry that I plan on being in forever, and what started my journey into entrepreneurship for the last 3 years or so. So I do remember just, being so nervous, and really the biggest thing that I learned that I wish I would have known now in making that shift of going from an employee to an entrepreneur was, one, just being really resilient. Luckily in my childhood, I learned that very, very early on, to be able to be resilient and just keep pushing forward. The other thing was faith. I struggled with this a lot growing up, and even now I struggle with this a little bit, to be able to have faith in something way bigger than myself and to believe something before I see it, and then start to create it, and also let go of what what it might have to look like and trust the process to get there. And the third thing is to be passionate, have so much passion about something that is way bigger than myself, and attach myself to a mission and to people around me that are going to keep pushing and building me up to get there, was the three biggest things that I would say had made a difference. So to go into that, on the resilience piece, of course, there's always struggles when it comes to being a successful entrepreneur. This first one here, business often comes before family. Man, this is a really touchy subject for a lot of people, including myself. I struggled with this so much when I first got into the business, because I think that when you become an entrepreneur, if you're really, really passionate about what it is that you do, there is absolutely no turning that off. It's not going to a job and then going home at the end of the day. You are on all the time because this is your mission and this is what you're going to make a difference in for the world. And so I think the biggest thing with this is that you have to be able to communicate with your family, with your spouse, with your kids, and let them know what is the reason behind what you're doing. And even better, get them involved in what you're doing. Let them become a part of the mission and see why this is so important to your future. And I definitely don't think there's ever any true balance, to be honest. I think that balance is something that we always work towards, never really achieve. Some days you might be spending way more time on family stuff. Some days you might be spending way more time on business stuff, but it's just communicating and being on the same page. The next one is constantly hearing no. So constantly hearing no, I mean, you hear no whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur. I think that the biggest difference on that is that when you hear no as an employee, or at least for me anyways, I knew that it meant no, and I really was kind of scared to speak up and voice my opinion, because I never felt valuable enough as an employee to be listened to or to be heard. Honestly, I thought that that I would get fired if I spoke my opinion, or you know, it would have been a waste of breath. Now, hearing no as an employee, no just means, okay, I have a new project to go back and work on, and how can I reevaluate this and think outside the box so I can get there in a different way? And then working more hours than you do. Than a 9-to-5. Yeah, a 9-to-5 job, it's very consistent. You know what time you're going to get off work. You know what your pay is going to be. However, like I mentioned, I felt like sitting there in a 9-to-5 job, most of the time I could do all of my tasks in half of that time, but I was an hourly employee, so I had to still wait those 8 hours a day, and I felt like I was wasting a lot of time where I could be spending somewhere else. Now, yeah, you might have to work, especially at the beginning, you may have to work longer hours. There might be things that you miss out on, and you're working on weekends and evenings and those types of things. But I can honestly say that there's never been a time where I looked back on the time I spent working on myself and my business and said, wow, I wish I could have done something differently, or I wish I should have been doing something else aside from working on my business. Yeah, there might have been things I could have been doing that were more productive in my business, like Reed talked about, but never have I looked back and thought that I should have done something different, because it always pays off in some way, shape, or form. And maybe it's not right now, maybe it's years from now that you start to see the payoff. Now, letting negative people go from your life, that's a big one. Honestly, even outside of being an entrepreneur, that's just a big part of self-love and self-care. Letting people go that aren't necessarily supportive of what you're doing. A lot of people think their biggest supporters when they get into a business is going to be their family and their close friends, but oftentimes that's not the case. So you get to make that choice of staying loyal and staying in those people's lives that aren't necessarily serving you, or creating the dream life that you want to, and maybe having some new associations that are going to support you and lift you up. Comfort zone. There's no way you can stay in your comfort zone when you're an entrepreneur. The more you get out of your comfort zone, the more levels you're going to hit in the business. And having fun can sometimes be paused. You do wear a lot of hats, so there might be some things that aren't the most fun in the business. I have a ton of fun with what I do, but there's other things that aren't the most fun, but knowing it's going to pay off later. And emergencies are your responsibility. Honestly, everything is a responsibility when you're a business owner and an entrepreneur. So it's important to take responsibility for it and own it, and not necessarily beat yourself up for it, but be able to evaluate what it is that you did wrong or could improve or do better, and then go back. Now, others, Oh, let me go back here. So others owning your time and money as an employee, what that means is you have to ask for paid time off. You have to ask permission to spend time with your family, to go on vacation. You have to ask for a raise. Somebody else has to dictate how much money you can make. And I'm going to be honest, this is probably a easier route, and it can be more comfortable, some people may think. And I do have to say that I think that in this area, it's very easy to become a victim of your circumstances because you get to blame somebody else for where you're at in your career. And again, that's how it was for me, at least. Now, making that crossover to you owning your own time and money, that again is taking responsibility for every single thing that you do, and knowing that the amount of income that you make is in direct proportion to what you do in your business and your daily activity and how many people you're serving every day. So how can you be mentally tough enough to cross those cross that over? Well, here's 4 tips that you can do. The first thing is to apply concentration, to be super, super laser focused and pretty obsessed with whatever your craft is. I think it's so important to master your craft. And this part is not necessarily the most fun part of the business. It's making sure that you practice a lot and that you get those free throws in, so that way you become really good at what it is that you do. And the more that you practice and prepare, the more confidence you build, and you're going to be able to talk to more people and help more people in what you do. The next one is using emotion to motivate yourself. This is huge, probably the biggest thing for me. There's no way I would have made it in the business where I'm at now, and I still have so much further to go, but there's no way I'd be here today without using emotion to motivate myself and visualizing what's to come, having something way, way bigger outside of myself that I can work towards, so that way any obstacles that come my way are not even a factor, because I know and I'm clear on where I'm going. Next one is using logic to steer the business. Embracing the data, tracking your numbers, figuring out what's serving me and what's not, and brutal honesty, just holding yourself accountable. And I would recommend getting a mentor that's several steps ahead of you that can take you on that journey, and you can learn from their mistakes as well. Performing in the face of fear. So again, that's having the faith and kind of just the blind trust to be able to jump in, make mistakes, and knowing that there is no failure. You just keep learning and you just keep going. And the last part here is having enough grit. So grit, to me, is exactly what it states on this slide. It's not going into something saying, well, I think maybe I'll try this and let's see how it works out for a couple of days. Let's see how this goes for a few months or a few years. That's not committing to something. So to me, grit means the commitment to be able to get up out of bed every single day, even when you don't feel like it, and knowing that your goal and your ambition is way bigger than whatever it is that's holding you back. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and send it back over to Reed, and he's going to talk about the answers you might want to have before making the move.
Awesome. Thanks, Sheila. I know you'd knock it out of the park around talking about how to sort of get through that dip. And just some practical things that you need to sort of look at. And you know, when I was in my consulting days, this is what we used to help companies with, is the types of things that Joe was sort of talking about, is like, you know, which industry would you be in, right? He was in manufacturing, he was in service, he was in different kind of areas. And, you know, kind of what market will you serve and what clients you'll go after. I think it's interesting, you know, Uber went after the transportation market. Really, they went after sort of taxi cab service. It's funny that people will take an Uber, but they won't take a taxi. But their market is really around, you know, their customers are both the people that are looking to earn extra income as well as the people that need a ride, right? And so they've tapped into this need that we've all got around sort of people needing, you know, what Chris was talking about, the gig economy, the people that need additional income, right, in their lives. And so things like Grubhub and Uber and Lyft and all of those places, Airbnb, are all sort of counting on the giving creative ways to have people help out and get that sort of side gig so that they can make and increase more income that we've talked about. And the question is like, well, what's going to be a differentiator for you, right? So if you're Lyft versus Uber, a lot of consumers on the transportation side don't see much of a difference. Maybe the drivers do, but how are you going to kind of make yourself different from other folks? On the products and service side, right, are you going to do something where you have to sell you know, a lot of something. Example, I've got a client who she does a sort of a nail polish replacement thing. She sells like $3 million a month. But at a $10 price point, that's a lot of product volume, right? And I imagine she has a garage full of products to kind of get out. And so what's those things? Or are you going to sort of pick a product that you can have huge margins on, but you only need to sell one or two of them, right? You need to kind of figure out what are the financials of those businesses. And it's certainly worthwhile to kind of go in there. And for me, certainly the industry that I chose had that sort of recurring income and the residuals that that I was looking for to kind of grow over time. A huge reason why I decided to sort of come here. And then what problem will you solve, right? Joe Pepper talked about when he was making the PA systems, right? He solved a specific problem and a huge need, but he solved that problem and then it was done, right? Or are you attacking an infinite game, right? Like financial literacy or feeding the world or clean water to the world, something like that, that is something, all of those are problems that will probably never complete. And so there's just something to kind of work on. Well, those bigger problems allow you to sort of enroll other people in your vision and your, kind of moving forward to kind of solve those problems. So what kind of big problems are you going to solve? And then lastly, sort of your ability, right? And Chris mentioned the evangelopreneur kind of pieces. What skills and talents qualify you for it? And I think people overestimate kind of what's important here, right? So for example, if you were super excited about massage therapy, right? You can either be a massage therapist for 8 or 10 hours a day, or you can, for somebody else, or you can go do that. And suddenly you need to also become janitorial, finance, accounting, customer service. And you need to sort of build those other skills around you. So no matter what you do as an entrepreneur, you're going to learn a lot new skills. And the other piece about that is that you're going to have to surround yourself, right? They say that you surround yourself, that the people that you surround yourself with are more important than the business that you choose to be in, right? So you really got to sort of surround yourself kind of with those folks. And, so if you're going to go into a direct partnership, it's more important that you think about it almost as a marriage, right? Because it's somebody you're going to want to be in, somebody that has the same values and goals, somebody that sees your vision. Because as things get hard, right, you want somebody that's going to lift you up when you're down. You may be having a bad day, you may be in your dip, or vice versa, but you really want to be in there with somebody that you can be there. I love this quote from Jim Rohn saying, kind of, you're the average of 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you look around and, everybody just take a second to write down a couple names, you probably make within $5,000 or $10,000 of those 5 people, which means that you may have to, if you're going to increase your income, you may need to change the people that you're around, right? That can, as Sheila mentioned, that were a couple of steps ahead of you that can kind of help, up your average thing and kind of pull you forward. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Awesome job, Reed and Sheila. Incredible job, man. That was some good stuff. And the mental toughness. There's the best book, Steve Siebold, 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. He was a co-writer of this presentation and the materials. So make sure you guys pick that up. And anyway, for the last two, we got some feedback happening for some reason. So let me break. Genesis and Tenza, are you ready?
Yep.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Genesis, are you on?
Ready.
All right, watch out for these two guys. These are our last two, and I'm going to do some closing remarks. But Genesis Bynes is very passionate. She's wicked funny, and you might see some of that today. Very smart lady, grateful that we found her. She left banking because she was sick of only helping the wealthy and having all those limits. And so she's an amazing, passionate woman, mother of one super amazing daughter. And we love her, Savannah. And Tenza the Great. She was our team's MVP last year. And she's quite the transformational story. I give her grief all the time. She was a wallflower. Do you guys know what a wallflower is? When you come into a meeting, you face the wall, right? And now we can't get her to stop talking. So anyway, but we love her. She's phenomenal. Her growth has been amazing, super sharp, very successful, very passionate about our mission. And so take it over, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate you.
Hey guys, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I actually went to school to be a psychologist, right? So I have a different background than everyone who's spoken so far. I'll never forget the day that I'm finishing up school. I go over to my parents' house and I sit down at their kitchen table and I look them in the eye and I say, hey guys, thanks so much for helping me with school. And my mom looks at me and she goes, you're going on to grad school, right? You're still going to be a psychologist? And I say, well, I kind of want to be a cop. And she goes, oh, baby, no. And my dad's like, huh, that's kind of cool, right? So I did. I went, I was a cop. But anybody who knows me knows that I want to love and hug and squeeze and kiss everybody. So it wasn't really the right place for me. So I ended up coming back to the world of finance. I landed at one of the big banks, and I was the annoying person when you walk in. It's like, hey, what brings you in today? Great, I can help you with your deposit, and I'm going to give you a credit card, right? And so that's where I started out. And I moved my way up to the bank, much as Chris had said, into the private bank, and it was crazy there, guys. You had to have $250,000 to walk through my door, and then by the time I left, you had to have $1 million to walk through my door, right? And it just really blew my mind. And I remember one day, well, you know, the bank had started kind of laying people off naturally, though. They would call it natural attrition, right? So as people would quit, they just wouldn't refill the position. So I remember one day, we were running our branches just bare bones, and I was dropping my little girl off. She was about 5 years old at the time. I'm dropping her off at the school, and she looks at me and says, okay, Mom, but you're going to be back at 2:30, right? And I'm like, yes, baby, I'll be back at 2:30, I promise. I go to work, somebody calls in sick, I'm stuck there till 6. I get back, it's the middle of winter, it's dark outside. She's the only sweet baby left there in the entire school, her and the teacher. And I walk in and I say, hey, baby, and she won't talk to me. I look at the teacher and I say, thank you. She goes, you're welcome. And I walk out, and any parent who has a kid or remembers being a child, you remember that cry was kind of like, you know that cry? That's that. I've been crying a long time and I've been crying hard, right? And so I stop and I look her in the eye and I said, baby, what's wrong? And she says, well, Mama, I really thought that you loved me. And guys, I felt my heart just break in half. I said, baby, like, I love God and then I love you. Don't tell your dad, but I love God and then I love you, right? And she goes, it just seems like if you love me that much, you wouldn't have left me here all day like that, Mama, right? And so I really had to take inventory of what am I doing with my life? Yes, I'm making good money. Yes, I'm helping people build their assets and their wealth. But am I really doing what really stokes my fire, but what's really actually important to me as a person? And so I sat down, I thought about it, and I said, entrepreneurism, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I'm gonna do, right? And there was a couple of different reasons why I chose entrepreneurism. One, I wanted to be with my little girl, right? So now I do the cross guard at the school, so I'm not there, hi, sweet baby, and I make sure they get a smile before they go into school, right? I'm able to pick her up after school, have dinner. My husband's traveling all the time and help with homework and all that sort of thing. But the other thing I really wanted to do, and you guys have probably started to notice this during this quarantine, is that I wanted to be able to spend time with my folks, right? As they're getting older, I want to be able to make sure that I'm spending all the time that I possibly can with those people, right? So there's those two things. And then also, okay, so when I left that bank, I was one of the top bankers in the state, one of the top 3 bankers in the state. I remember going and asking for a raise and asking for a promotion and them telling me, no, not right now, sorry. Well, you're going to be on the list though. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm too good to not be able to control my time, not to be able to control how much I make, not to be able to control when I come and go. No, thank you, it's not for me, right? When I think about the #1 lesson that I wish that I would have listened to when I first came into entrepreneurism, it was this. I remember my mentor telling me to put A tasks first. By A tasks, I mean those things that are going to help you to move your business forward, right? So making those calls, right? We all hate making calls, right? Making those calls, checking in with your team, reflecting on what worked and what didn't work so that you can make course corrections and do it often, right? Once a week at least, and make those course corrections. That's the #1 thing that I wish I would have listened to. And that all comes from having that core of good people around you, right? We talk about the core beliefs, right? Encouragement. Sometimes, so my dad's a pastor, right? So I grew up in church and all that. And he said, well, baby, sometimes you got to learn to encourage yourself, right? And it's so true, but it's so much nicer and so much easier to have somebody around you that can help encourage you, right? Not only can they encourage you, but they can also help you know your blind spots, right? Sometimes you think you just don't have anything left in your tank, and you look up and realize that you're only at 40% and you got plenty more in your tank, but it takes somebody else to really, you know, open your eyes so that you can see that, right? And then experience. I think it was Sheila who talked earlier about having that mentor. She said you guys should go look for a mentor that's going to help you. And it's so true, right? I think about being a parent and trying to teach Savannah everything that I know so that she doesn't have to fall into the same pitfalls that I fell into, right? And you really want to, you know, latch on to that leader that you choose as your coach, because here's the thing, like leadership is developed daily. It's not overnight. Right? And so just because you decide to become an entrepreneur, like Abe said in the beginning, that doesn't make you, like, you got to grow into it. And so you have to have a core group of people around you to help you grow into that. Guidance. When you're looking at a business and you're deciding whether or not it's the right thing for you, you want to look at, is there a system that's already established, or am I going to have to make it from scratch? Right? It's so much easier a lot of times to just plug and play, right? And so those are things that you have to weigh. And then camaraderie. Listen, so my mom, she loves to go for walks, And sometimes I have to tell her, Mom, you're retired. I'm not retired. You are the one that's retired. I don't have time to go right now, right? But anyhow, I go with her. But it's funny because when I walk by myself, I get about a half mile in and I'm like, whoo, well, I think that's enough for today. I don't want to do that. But when I walk with my mom, we look up and we've gone 3.5 miles and we're like, hey, where did that time go, right? And that's all about having that good camaraderie, because you have people to go along with you and help share the burden and sharing the fun and the excitement and the joy of winning. Fantastic. So, you know, Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much, right? And it's so true. Hang on, guys. Sorry about that. All right. I promise I practiced moving the slide. Sorry about that. All right. So, oh my gosh. Okay. So, I'm not going to touch it this time. All right. So the options. So this is part of the reason why I chose to go into entrepreneurism, right? Because I wanted to really control my time. You know, sometimes I want you guys to think about it. Like, you're going back to work on Monday and I want you to walk up to your boss and say, hey, so I was thinking, I'd like to just kind of do this thing in my spare time. Is that okay with you? Right? He or she's gonna look at you like you're crazy, right? But that's one of the great things about entrepreneurism, right? You can still have your 40-hour job week and then still do whatever it is that you really love and you're passionate about in the evenings or on the weekends until you can build it up and maybe flip it. Right now, maybe you're working part-time at that 40-hour job at 9 to 5, and you're working part-time in whatever it is that you love until you're like full-blown, 100% in, complete focus, building your passion, building your dream, building that legacy for you and your family. Right? So the options, it doesn't matter which way you grow. Many people are working full-time, but also pursuing their business passions on the side. These people are just as much entrepreneur as those who do it full-time. And when I seen that one, I kind of chuckled to myself because I remember when I first had Savannah, and she, you know, got a little older and she's a toddler at this point. And I remember my friends with multiple children telling me, you know, you're not really a mom, right? And I'm like, what? Yes, I am indeed. And that's something that somebody may try and tell you about entrepreneurism, right? If you're just doing something on the side, they're like, oh, that's just a hobby. No, keep at it. The number one thing is to not quit.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Genesis. Great story. I just enjoy listening to your story. And, you know, it is my honor, everyone, to be able to share with you a little bit about my story and, you know, some of the tips and the experience that I had in transitioning, went from employee to entrepreneur, and especially with someone with a background of accounting and auditing. That's my background. So probably a more risk-averse mindset that I had before I became an entrepreneur. So that's why it scared me. when I was thinking about, going out on my own and working. I was like, I don't know if I could do it. Oh my God. And no one in my family has done it before. No one in my family. And I came up with came from a culture of, you just basically work hard, go to school, work hard, and then find a good job, just stay in there and retire. So entrepreneurship is foreign concept to my family. So it was tough for me, but, and especially when I was young, right? Early 20s at that time, and had never really had no experience, not even helping anyone to manage a business, let alone running my own business and owning my own business. But what happened, my reason why going to entrepreneur, and probably it relates to a lot of people too, is I remember when I was at my last job, and I was walking over to my boss's office to ask him for a vacation, time off for my vacation. And of course, right, like Chris said, I was super shy at that time. I was scared of everything. I was scared of even talking to people. So on my way to his office, I was just like playing this horror movie in my head. And like, what if he said no? What would I feel at that time? And literally, I felt this like sick feeling in my stomach just by playing the what if he said no. And so at that time, that really, that feeling is kind of like, give me this thinking. I was like, this is so not good. I mean, I'm an adult. Why do I have to go and ask for someone's permission to have some time off, right? Because frankly, when I work, during my work time, I work hard. I get my work done. Everything is done. I was like, why is it that when I want my time off, I have to go and ask for permission for it? And so that's when I'm kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have to beg people for what I want to do with my life. And so that's kind of like stirred up that idea in my head that I want to have the freedom. So I came into and having entrepreneur as a career because I want freedom. I want to have more freedom, more control of my time. And then so here I am. So I'd love to share with you what I learned, right? We're super grateful of the process and the experience and all really the help that I got along the way. So 19 years ago, I made that change. Super happy. Now I'm in my 19th year being an entrepreneur. And guess what? My income more than doubled my highest income when I was an employee. And I have more control of my time. I have more control of my life. And ultimately, I'm just happier, right? Because when you have more control of your life, guess what? You're just happier. And so I think that's ultimately what we want. But in the process, of course, right, there's a lot of ups and downs. But after the 19 years of working and being an entrepreneur, what I have just learned recently, there's one important factor in entrepreneurship that has become more and more and more important right now, given the time that we're living in, is this E factor. What does that stand for? Digitally enabled, right? So one of the things I would say is this, after everyone have shared with you what to look for, another thing that is important is that when you look for a business, you want to make sure if that business is able to run and operate remotely, online, right, electronically without any interruption. And this pandemic has been a great example to show us that. You would believe, you would have to agree with me that in the last 4 months, any business that actually can operate remotely has grown so much. Right? While other business who could not do that really failed. They're on the verge of closing business. So I highly recommend you to look into that too in the business. So these are some of the things that you want to look at, right, in a business. One is there videos, right? Capability and tools that allows you to prospect, to gather clients, right? Using your text, your email, website, web link, all of that. And then is there software out there that help you to manage your contacts by phone? And guess what? Why? Because we're kind of like attached to this phone. Everywhere we go, I remember like if we lose our phone, I don't know what to do. I don't remember people's number anymore, being an accountant. Isn't that sad? Just because of this phone, but when we need it, right? Is so valuable to our business right now. And then also, is there a presentation design for you that allow you to share your product, your service to your market, right? To your customers out there. And then this is important. Is there a way for you to submit and complete your business transaction online, electronically, and securely. Okay, and then there there tools that help you to build your online presence and to get exposure, because guess what? Everyone, the whole world is online 24/7. So you want to be there to get that exposure. And then we talked about working as a team, right? Together as a team, we can achieve more. So again, then are there digital tools that you can use to actually communicate with your team, to help everyone to grow and lift everyone up so that we can continue to grow the business out there. Okay, and I just want to go over the kind of like the essentials of having a successful entrepreneurship experience or career, right? When you look at the risk, are there high or low risk, okay, for you to get into to making this change? And the reality, right, the reality of being an entrepreneur, there are ups and downs, but never quit. I remember this when I first started. Okay, I basically had just learned everything at age 20. When I first started, someone told me this, give me an example of a bamboo tree, right? Because it's like you can just plant that tree or just watch and wait for years and don't see any sign of life at all. But then overnight, that tree can just shoot up to like 20, 30 feet overnight. So then every time, I mean, there are times I was thinking, I was like, oh my God, this is so hard, should I quit? But then I was like, what if, right? What if I am that bamboo tree? Okay, and tomorrow might be that day. Next week might be the day where I will see that result. And so, and I'm glad I didn't quit, right? And then the mindset, having the right mindset, what I was taught is the right mindset to have is constantly learning and growing. Okay, because again, the law of nature is that you're either growing or you're dying. There's no such thing as being in the middle, and kind of no changing, staying stagnant. And we saw that before. And one of the things I look at them and say, hey, you know what? If we're staying the same, someone else in your same line of business who is learning and growing, guess what? Over time, you're falling behind compared to that company, right? So your competitors. So making sure you have the right mindset of growing and then having the answers that Reed mentioned again, right? The answer before you choose, you know, make that move is what industry are you going to get into? What is the potential? What is the size of the market? What product are you going to offer? And what problem are you solving? The bigger the problem that you're going to solve, that you can solve, the bigger your business, the bigger the income would be. And then recognize your strengths. Okay, what qualities you have, what skills you have to qualify you for the job to be successful. And I cannot say enough for about the people that you have around you. Choosing the people who to be in business with you is awesome because they either lift you up or they hold you back. Super important, right? And then also, you know, find the people who can be your mentors. Surround yourself with the people who are successful. And what my lesson is this, though, is that I want to surround myself with, okay, you want to surround yourself with the people who are successful in the field that you're in and also who are living the life that you want to have. Okay, you want to learn from them. And then the option, super grateful for that, super important right there because it takes a lot of the stress away, okay? Makes the job a lot easier too, the transition a lot easier. You're gonna say, what option do I have? How can I run my business, right? Do I have the control to run it with as many hours as I can or whenever I want or wherever I want just to continue to run and grow my business and build my business? And then last but not least is that E factor. I think, you know, what the benefit that it gives me being in the business for this long is I get to see the changes in my business, right? 19 years ago, technology is not that important. Right now is the key. And it has helped me to build really my business nationwide now. I never thought I could do that. So that is a necessity now for us to get into entrepreneurship. I'm waiting for this thing to load. There you go. So this is what is super exciting to me is this. No matter where you are in your process of building your business, no matter where you are in starting it, beginning, transitioning, how hard it is, guess what? Live it. Live. What I see is you actually live the benefits that entrepreneurship gives you, right? Because that's the reason why we're in it, okay? If we have to like struggle and suffer is not that fun, then you cannot be creative. You cannot see the opportunity. You cannot be successful. So live it. So what is that? What is that benefits and the lifestyle that an entrepreneur can give us? Is the freedom to control our time, to make our own decision, and most important, to pursue our potential. So we all see that, right? We want to be our own boss. One of the things on here that I love the most, and this makes me feel so kind of like I'm like on top of the mountains, is this. You see that when it said earn without limits, right? We have the, as an entrepreneur, you have the freedom to control how much you want to make. And one of the examples, as I learned, is that every time I want to increase my income to a certain level, right, I basically just went straight to my mentor and I said, okay, I want to bring my level, my income to this. I want to have this income. What should I do? What do you think I should do? So how do you recommend you to think of that? I'm going to say, yeah, we're going into this entrepreneur for these reasons. And so we just have to acknowledge it, even though it doesn't look like it's all that fun. But you know what? The more you live it, the more you experience it, the faster it will come your way. And then in the end, right, the question is, then what is freedom? Right? What is freedom? The freedom is the power to live the way you want, right? The way you want, however you want, with whoever you want, whenever. That is the key. And then here's something that I learned in my experience is, you know, there has to be an easier way, and there is an easier way. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be hard. So again, right, surrounding yourself with the right people. So some of the lessons I learned, again, going back to is, you know, never quit. I think it's kind of like the same theme for all of us here is never quit. So you don't want to do that. Surround yourself with the right people. Find a mentor around you, and then, you know, choose the right field to get into. So with that, hope that has been helpful, and I'm giving it back to you, Chris.
Okay. Well, home run. I love this group. I'm so super proud of you guys, and the value that you guys create has been amazing. And I just want to bring it home with, 21 years of experience, and no one's probably failed more at being an entrepreneur than me. And so what I love about mentoring and the model in which we run is I can share here, for about 15 minutes or so and put this in your plan and think about these things. But this is stuff that I had to learn the hard way, and you can avoid this. And so I want to just run through some concepts. And the first one is really, are you interested in achieving that ideal life and your goals, dreams, and aspirations, or are you actually committed? Interested versus committed. So I've seen a lot of people fail at business, and they've often just been interested, not committed. And I'm a big fan of a personal development guy out there named John Assaraf. And he recently told a story. I think he's in his 60s now, but when he was 19, he was getting in a lot of trouble, and he knew that he was either going to end up in prison or dead. And his brother told him to take a train to Toronto and have lunch with him and his mentor, because his brother knew he was going down the wrong road. And the mentor was wildly successful, and he had John at 19 write out his goals and his dreams and his ideal life. And then he asked him, he said, hey, are you interested in those things happening, or are you committed? And he said, no, I'm absolutely committed. He's like, well, that's good to hear, because what I need you to do is I need you to move to Toronto. And I need you to do that in the next 2 weeks. I need you to enroll in this school, and I need you to pay $500 for that. And what started coming out of his mouth is he said, well, I can't move in 2 weeks. That's too soon. And I'm not a good student. And I don't have the $500 to enroll in that school. And he said, you're interested, because when you're interested, what happens is you start making up excuses. You start going into your story. When you're committed, you absolutely find a way. And when he explained that to John, who's now a wildly successful entrepreneur and personal development expert, guess what? He got committed. He found the money. He moved. He enrolled in school, and his life was never the same. So you got to ask yourself, are you interested or committed? If you're interested, it'll just never happen. You got to absolutely be committed. There's also a price to be paid. And my mentors have said, you got to pay the price, and you got to pay it up front. You got to pay it in full. And one of the challenges I watch with entrepreneurs is they negotiate in their mind if the price is worth it or not. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my career but I have not made that one. As a young kid in college, I just had this penchant to find successful people and successful business owners, and I would interview them. I'd ask every single one of them. I said, was it worth it? And to a man and a woman, I've never had in, almost 30 years, I've never had anybody say, you know, it really wasn't worth it. They all said it was worth it. And so I just enveloped in my mind that the price, right, not always fun, not sunshine, lollipops, and roses, but the price was always going to be worth it. And I was going to figure it out. And it wasn't, was entrepreneurship going to work for me or not work for me? I had this mentality of until, meaning I was going to put in the work and the development, and I knew it was worth it. So if I knew it was worth it, I was willing to do whatever it took to make it happen, and until the success would show up. So don't negotiate the price. Just agree that it's all worth it and move on. You have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. I know we talked a little bit about that, but a fixed mindset is someone that's just innately, they're like, you know what, I'm just born this way. This is just the way I am. That mentality is not going to work in being an entrepreneur. If you're a growth mindset, you're going to figure it out. And there was a recent study of brain scans of people that claim to have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And a challenge would be placed in front of them. And the person with the fixed mindset, their brain, the synapses and electrical, system, it didn't light up. Nothing happened up there, right? They just were like, they already checked out. They're like, I'm not that person. I can't do that. Where the growth-minded person was, everything was wiring and firing, and they were trying to figure out, how to solve it. And anybody that's a fixed mindset, I would say leave that story behind. Make a list of all the skills you've acquired over the last 15, 20, 30 years, all the skills that you've acquired. I bet you didn't show up with those. I bet you put in the time, effort, and energy to develop those skills and become growth oriented. The other thing that I see is this part of our brain that's called our ego. And the ego is pretty detrimental. And it's the part of our mind that basically talks us out of doing things. It's the part of our mind that loves comfort and certainty. And what I've gotten good at, I'm not good at a lot of things, but I've gotten really good at understanding my relationship with my ego, and that it wants to keep me right where I am. It wants to keep me comfortable and stuck. It doesn't want me to grow. It doesn't want me to hop outside my comfort zone. And so I've gotten really clear when it starts entering. I do a little technique. People think I need therapy, but right when that ego starts talking me out of doing things I know I'm supposed to do, I just say delete, 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 and I redirect my mind to what it is that I want. And when that comes in, that mentality, what you're able to do is you just start answering the question of what do I really want, the big why, the dream, the ideal life, and then what's the next thing that I need to do. But one of the things that the ego does is it gets us to start overthinking. And I've seen it a lot with people that we train and mentor. They sit down, they like the plan, they're excited about it, and then they try to mentally map out how they're going to get to their destination. And it sounds really smart, but however, there are thousands of variables that we can't control, and our brains really are not that smart. So the number one thing that the brain's supposed to do is it's really just supposed to map out our end destination. And then we're going to have to course correct and move and maneuver, and we got to take action. And when people start overthinking their plan, I also know that there's fear at the root of it. Overthinking is a mask for fear, for inaction. And I was listening to a lecture of the Macy's.com president. The guy's been the Macy's.com president for several decades. And he's watched the internet change, right? The internet and Macy's.com was a joke way back in the day. And then it became a competitor with their big box stores. And now it's all seamless. They work together online, the big stores, all those things. Lots of things have changed. And they were trying to figure out how to make it all work. And they were spending millions of dollars on consultants and accountants and attorneys and engineers, and they weren't getting anywhere. And he finally just fired everybody. He's like, here's what we need to do, man. We need to pull up the anchor and we need to leave the dock, right? pull up the anchor and leave the dock. And we'll course correct, we'll change, we'll do all that. And so you just got to start one foot in front of the other, okay? Pull up the anchor, do the next thing, course correct. The only way you ever get clarity in life is by taking action. End of story. And so, so don't let your ego tell you you got to map everything out and you got to know everything. And it's like leaving your garage. Say, I'm not going to leave my garage until all the stoplights are green. Not going to work, right? So, so that's huge. So listen to the ego, direct it to what you want. Unrealistic time horizons. That's a big one. And I see it, and I really see it now because people want things now. If you're trying to build a skyscraper, you gotta put down a pretty deep foundation. And there's really 3 phases of business, and it's phase 1, and y'all just got to go through it. And phase 1 is it worth it? And I'm telling you, just click that one off. It's worth it, okay? And you want to get past that as quick as possible, but just understand it's going to take what it takes. Phase 1 is it's worth it. Phase 2 is, or phase 1 is it worth it? Phase 2 is it's definitely worth it. And then phase 3 is this, man, I can't believe the results I'm getting for the effort I'm putting in, right? So it's almost this curve of, you know, here's my effort and then here's my results. And you're in that phase of, is it worth it? And I watched my dad do that. I mean, he was a struggling entrepreneur, but I think one of the challenges he had, and I watched it, was he would put in the time. He'd put in a year or 2 or whatever. And he'd look at his time, and then he would look at his results, and he'd just frustrated. And he's like, it's just not worth it. And then he'd start again, and then he'd do the same thing again. And he'd just start, restart. But you got to do it until till they cross, right? And your results are up here and your efforts here. And so you just absolutely got to give it the time that it takes, and you got to stick with it. And really, it's all about the small steps. And success is really all about small things cared for. And the problem when you're starting something you're unfamiliar with, and your ego's screaming at you, and it's telling you don't need to do that, and it's trying to talk you out of it. And that's why you got to have the big why. Because you got to remind yourself constantly about why you're doing this and why you're moving forward. But what happens is it's literally like standing at base camp looking up at Mount Everest. I mean, that's daunting, right? And your ego's firing, you're fearful and all that stuff. But the journey of 1,000 miles, the journey from base camp up to Mount Everest is all going to be about small steps. Small steps. Pick a path, take action, course correct, small things cared for. Business, life, success is all about the compounding of small things. And so when you start taking small steps, doing small things, then you know you can do it. You start building confidence. The way you build confidence is you keep your word to yourself. Mentoring's been mentioned a million times here. I'm just going to hammer it home. And 89% of small business owners, 1,000 financially independent small business owners were interviewed. And they said, what was the #1 reason you became financially independent? 89% said, I had somebody that showed me. Business is like a minefield. And they're on the other side of that minefield, living my ideal life. All I got to do is follow their footsteps, and everything's going to be okay. But that's literally one of the #1 reasons why I see people fail, is they just don't have the mentoring, don't have the coaching to make it happen. And then the last concept is really this concept called do it now. And when my wife and I were getting ready to write our first book, we enrolled in a writing course with I think the #1 author of all time. The guy's name is Mark Victor Hansen. Him and Jack Canfield wrote All the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Unbelievable. And so we enrolled in his book writing class to get a book done in 90 days. And it was pretty cool because every couple of weeks we'd have these, 1,000 people on a conference call. You'd have a speaker come in, and the speaker this time had gone from broke to being a billionaire in 10 years. Unbelievable. I'm like, man, I'm so excited to hear this guy. And Mark Victor Hansen, talks him up, and he turns the call over to him. And he said, hey, you got 45 minutes to tell him how to do it. And he said, you know what? I only need about 3 minutes. And I just started adopting the affirmation of do it now. Do it now, do it now, do it now, do it now. Get inspiration, do it now. Work out, right? Everything I had to do, every time I got some inspiration, every time I'm like, you got to do that, just do it now, do it now, do it now, do it now. And that has served me. It's served a lot of the speakers that you've heard from. It'll eliminate fear. It'll eliminate procrastination. And you just got to do it now. And so, you know, as I was making that shift to becoming an entrepreneur, and I actually sat down and really thought, and I love pads of paper, and I love writing, and I love dreaming, and I love thinking, and I love getting stuff down, and I love getting in that zone of inspiration. And I started reading a book called Think and Grow Rich, written by Napoleon Hill, who basically had interviewed the most successful entrepreneurs of Edison and Ford and Alexander Graham Bell, 500 of the most successful people. Good book for you to pick up. Because you can learn everything, hundreds of years of experience. You can read a book in literally a month and gain all their knowledge. And as I started reading it, I'm working 70, 80 hours a week as an accountant and hating my life. But I was busy, and I thought what I was doing was really important. And I wasn't getting raises, and I didn't have control of my time. And I started reading about these entrepreneurs, and what blew me away was they didn't become wealthy because they chased money. They became wealthy because they solved huge problems. And by making people's lives better, they became wildly financially free, and their families, legacies forever. But the thing that blew me away was they all had these things called dreams, which I'm like, what are those? Like, I remember those as a kid. I remember having dreams. What happened to them? Well, we get older, and you know, we put it off, and we put it off too long, and then our ego's like, well, it's just not possible anymore, and then we just quit having them, and then we do what my mentor calls it the most offensive word in the English language. It's called settling. You settle. You just settle in. And you give up dreaming. And I started dreaming, and I started thinking about what I wanted, and I got real excited about it. But I knew that being an employee was the ultimate settle. I knew it would never happen unless I was an entrepreneur. And so I call that my moment of truth. My moment of truth was to either hang on to what I wanted and to change my vehicle, or to settle and shrink what I wanted inside of what I was doing. And I just said, I'm just not going to do it. And at that time, I read an article, the USA Today interviewed 1,000 people in their 80s. And they said, if you had to do it all over again, what would you have done? And almost all of them had massive regrets. They almost all had massive regrets. And they're like, oh, I would have taken more risk. I wouldn't have played it safe. I would have started that business. I would have done this. I would have done that. I was just like, man, there's a lot of things I want, but man, there's one thing that I never want. I don't want to look back on my life and have regrets at all. And my favorite quote of Martin Luther King is, most men and women die at 18. We just wait till they're 65, 75, 85 to bury them. And what he was talking about was they give up. They exist. They settle. And we just don't want that for you. So that's why we're laying this out for you guys today. I challenge you to really think about your ideal life and what you want, and begin throwing some business ideas and brainstorming and thinking, which is kind of the last thing people do. They don't really think. And so just carving out the time. Maybe that's your next little thing you need to do, your next little step. As I'm talking, pull out your phone, schedule time with yourself, hour, 2 hours. Begin thinking about what you want. Begin to think about some things that you're curious about, some things that you're passionate about. Follow through with this. We'll get you the link to the presentation so you can watch it, stop it, look at the slides, but begin that process. And then I highly recommend following up with whoever invited you, because whoever invited you is a very successful entrepreneur, and they can give you some of that mentoring and guidance and coaching to help you move further. So hopefully this served you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks for tuning in. Happy Father's Day to all you amazing fathers out there. Great job to everybody today. You guys absolutely hit a home run, and we hope to see you soon. Be safe and healthy. Take care.